Daniel, hi.
Could you make me a woman?
Honey, I'm so happy. Oh, come here.
I knew you'd understand.
What if I told you that one of the most beloved comedies of the entire 1990s was also one of the most chaotic, emotionally complicated, and downright accident-prone productions in Hollywood history? We are talking about Mrs. Doubtfire, the film that made you laugh until you cried, then just made you cry, and somehow convinced an entire generation that a man in a latex grandmother mask was completely believable. But behind those sensible shoes and that powdery British accent lay a production full of real battles, genuine accidents, and decisions that nearly broke the whole thing apart. Today, we are cracking open 20 verified, wild, extraordinary facts about Mrs. Doubtfire that will absolutely change how you see this movie forever. Number 1. The second biggest film of 1993. Let's set the scene before we get into the chaos, because I think people genuinely forget just how enormous Mrs. Doubtfire was. This film was made on a budget of $25 million. It earned approximately $441 million worldwide. That is not a hit. That is a phenomenon. The only movie that beat it at the box office in 1993 was Jurassic Park, Steven Spielberg's dinosaur blockbuster, widely considered one of the most technically revolutionary films ever made. Mrs. Doubtfire, a man in a gray wig making tea, came in second. It grossed more than Schindler's List, more than The Fugitive, more than In the Line of Fire and Philadelphia and Sleepless in Seattle combined. It was number 1 in Australia and Japan for 9 consecutive weeks. It was Fox's highest-grossing international film at the time of its release. And it did all of that because of one central, irreplaceable ingredient: Robin Williams. Everything that follows in this video, every accident, every battle, every creative miracle, flows directly from the decision to put that man at the center of this story. Number 2. Multiple cameras, running at all times. Director Chris Columbus knew from the moment he signed on to direct Robin Williams that he was not working with a conventional performer. Williams did not just act scenes, he inhabited them, exploded through them, and constantly generated material that hadn't been written by anyone. So Columbus made a decision early in production that shaped the entire film. He kept multiple cameras trained on Williams at virtually all times, shooting the production almost like a documentary. The setup worked like this. Williams would perform each scene 2 or 3 times, more or less as written. Then Columbus would give him the signal, and Williams would play. That was the word Williams himself used: playing. Columbus called what happened next magical. The studio probably called it expensive, because the volume of footage generated by Williams's improvisation was staggering. Columbus has spoken about sitting on a warehouse full of unused material, roughly 972 boxes of film, roughly 2 million feet of footage that captured Williams in full flight during the production. He has floated the idea of turning it into a documentary about Williams's process. If that ever happens, it would be one of the most extraordinary films about filmmaking ever made. So we have the scale of this thing, the money, the camera setup, the sheer volume of Robin Williams being Robin Williams. But what came out of all that improvisation when the cameras were actually rolling? Specifically, what happened when the movie's most iconic scene wasn't planned at all? Number 3. The melting face scene was never in the script. This is one of the most wonderful production accidents in cinema history, so let's give it the proper attention it deserves. You know the scene. Mrs. Doubtfire is serving tea to the social worker, Mrs. Sellner, who has arrived to inspect Daniel's apartment. The scene is already tense, and then, gradually, catastrophically, Mrs. Doubtfire's face begins to melt. Here is what actually happened. The studio lights on set were running hot that day. The heat softened the latex prosthetics on Williams's face and warmed the icing he had applied over them as part of the character's disguise within the disguise. The icing began to visibly slide and drip in real time, completely unplanned, completely unscripted. What Robin Williams did next is the reason he was one of a kind. He noticed what was happening to his face, mid-scene, on camera, in front of a co-star, and built an entire comedic performance around it on the spot. Every panicked attempt to block the social worker's eyeline, every frantic repositioning, every escalating beat of that sequence was invented by Williams in the moment, because his makeup was literally melting off. Columbus kept the cameras rolling and let it unfold. The result became one of the most quoted, most beloved scenes in the entire film. Number 4. The script called for the cake. The meltdown was the bonus. Now here is the nuance that a lot of people get wrong when they tell this story. The script did call for a cake scene, a moment where Daniel has to smash his face into a cake to hide the damaged Mrs. Doubtfire mask from prying eyes. That part was planned, but the icing drips, the sliding latex, the full theatrical panic of the sequence as it plays out on screen, that emerged entirely from the heat accident. The scripted scene and the unscripted accident fused together in real time to create something neither the writers nor the director could have manufactured. That is what makes the scene so alive. It's half intention, half pure improvised survival instinct. Number 5. The makeup took 4 hours every single morning. Let's talk about what it cost Robin Williams to become Mrs. Doubtfire each day, because it is genuinely staggering. Every single morning of production, before Williams spoke a single line in character, he sat in the makeup chair for 4 full hours. The look was not a simple latex mask. It was an elaborate multi-piece prosthetic construction, with each component custom-made and glued directly onto his skin. The gray wig was created by Yolanda Tusieng, the same hairstylist who built Edward Scissorhands' iconic look. Director Columbus and the makeup team spent weeks studying hundreds and hundreds of photographs before landing on a 1940s-era English woman as their reference point for the character's face. The full team, makeup artist V. Neal, alongside Greg Canham and Tusieng, won the Academy Award for Best Makeup for their work on the film, which is a beautifully appropriate award for a movie whose most famous scene involves the makeup visibly falling apart. Williams later described the daily experience of being in the Doubtfire costume as running a marathon. He was not exaggerating. 4 hours to put it on. Hours of filming under hot lights that, as we now know, had consequences. And then the removal process at the end of the day. He did this for the entire production run. We know the accidents, we know the physical toll, but here's what makes this film even more fascinating. Robin Williams didn't just wear this character on a soundstage, he took her out into the world. What happened next is something out of a film itself. Number 6. He walked the streets of San Francisco in full costume. Robin Williams was not the kind of performer who clocked out when the cameras stopped. According to multiple accounts from the production, Williams would regularly leave the set and walk through the streets of San Francisco in full Mrs. Doubtfire costume, latex mask, gray wig, sensible shoes, the complete ensemble, specifically to test whether the disguise genuinely worked on real, unsuspecting members of the public. The answer, apparently, was yes. People in San Francisco interacted with him as an elderly British woman without the faintest idea they were talking to one of the most famous people alive. Columbus, who was repeatedly amazed by how far Williams pushed his commitment to the character, described his level of dedication as unlike anything he had encountered before. Most performers would do a camera test and call it done. Williams turned his disguise into a live social experiment. Number 7, and his own children didn't always recognize him. Here is the detail that really lands the full weight of how extraordinary the transformation was. It was not just strangers on the street who were fooled. There are accounts from the production suggesting that even people close to Williams, including his own family, occasionally failed to immediately clock that it was him in full costume. When the prosthetics team, the wig, the costume, and Williams's physical performance all aligned, the posture, the accent, the mannerisms he had developed specifically for the character, The effect was genuinely, almost disturbingly convincing. This was not a Halloween costume. This was a 4-hour-a-day transformation that could apparently fool the people who knew him best. Number 8. The courtroom speech was reshot because it was too overwhelming. Near the film's climax, Daniel delivers a raw, spontaneous-feeling monologue to the court about the love a parent has for their children. Audiences wept. Critics praised it. What almost nobody knows is that the take in the finished film is not the first one Williams recorded. The first time he performed that speech, accounts from the crew suggest that the room went completely silent when it was over. Not because it was bad, because it was so devastating, so emotionally present, that nobody knew what to do. Columbus looked around the room, saw the effect it had on the entire crew, and decided the scene was almost too much for the film. He asked Williams to do it again, at a slightly lower emotional pitch, so that audiences would be moved rather than simply broken. The version in the movie is the dialed-back version. Whatever Robin Williams delivered in that first take exists somewhere in those 972 boxes in a warehouse, and almost no one has seen it. So this is who Robin Williams was. On set, off set, in costume, out of costume. But none of it would have existed without a very specific chain of events that starts not in Hollywood, not in San Francisco, but in a second-hand shop in Edinburgh, Scotland. Number 9. The name Madame Doubtfire came from a real shop. The story behind the name Mrs. Doubtfire is one of those origin details that sounds too perfect to be real, but is completely verified. During the mid-1970s, British author Anne Fine was walking through Edinburgh when she passed a small bric-a-brac shop, the kind selling old jewelry, vintage furs, odd antiques. She never went inside. She never met the owner. But the name above the door, Madame Doubtfire, lodged itself somewhere in the back of her mind. More than a decade later, in 1986, Fine sat down to write a children's novel about a father who disguises himself as a housekeeper to stay close to his children after a divorce. And that Edinburgh shopkeeper's name came floating back up. The book, alias Madame Doubtfire, was published in 1987. A real, nameless, never-met shopkeeper in Scotland is the reason this character exists. Fine has since confirmed she had one specific request when Hollywood came to adapt her book: that the children in the film not be written as bratty or unpleasant. The filmmakers honored it entirely. Number 10. The film is based on a British children's novel most Americans have never read. While we're on the subject, it is genuinely surprising how many people who love this film have no idea it is based on a book at all. Anne Fine is a celebrated British children's author, and alias Madame Doubtfire was a well-known title in the UK. But across the Atlantic, the film adaptation largely overshadowed the source material. The novel and the movie share the same premise, but diverge significantly in tone and detail. Fine's version is quieter and more literary. Columbus and Robin Williams turned it into something louder, wilder, and far more spectacular. Both are worth your time, but most Americans have only ever met Mrs. Doubtfire through a screen. Number 11. The original script was set in Chicago. Here is a fact that even dedicated fans tend to get wrong. In the earliest drafts of the screenplay, the story of Mrs. Doubtfire was not set in San Francisco at all. It was set in Chicago. The decision to move the production to San Francisco was both practical and deeply personal. Robin Williams had spent a significant portion of his adult life in the Bay Area and had a profound connection to the city. Filming there gave his performance a grounded, lived-in quality that a Chicago backdrop might never have produced. Number 12. The interiors were all shot in a converted candy warehouse. The exterior of the Hillard family home, the beautiful Victorian painted lady at 2640 Steiner Street, is a real San Francisco landmark. But not a single interior scene in the film was actually shot inside that house. All of the indoor Hillard home sequences were filmed on large, purpose-built sets constructed inside a converted candy warehouse in San Francisco's Richmond district. The production built 5 full sets inside a 100,000-square-foot building that used to produce sweets. Meanwhile, Daniel Hillard's apartment scenes were filmed above the real Danilo Bakery at 516 Green Street, and the children's school scenes used the actual street corner at Filbert and Taylor. The movie blends real San Francisco geography with a massive fake candy factory. And you would never know. Number 13. Chuck Jones directed the opening cartoon. The animated sequence that opens Mrs. Doubtfire, in which a cartoon bird quits his TV show in protest, was directed by Chuck Jones. Not a Chuck Jones type, not inspired by Chuck Jones. Chuck Jones himself, the man who gave the world Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Wile E. Coyote, and the Roadrunner. A living legend of American animation, brought in to direct the opening 60 seconds of a Robin Williams family comedy. Jones and his team animated significantly more material than the finished film uses. A fraction of it appears on screen, and some of the additional footage was eventually released as a DVD special feature. The fact that Columbus thought to bring Jones in at all says something about the level of craftsmanship the filmmakers were genuinely trying to bring to every corner of this production. Even the parts most audiences would breeze past on their way to Robin Williams putting on a fake accent. So we have the book, the name, the setting, the animation legend. Everything clicked into place beautifully. But before any of that could happen, the film had to survive some genuinely brutal battles over who would be in it and what the story would actually look like. Number 14. Tim Allen was offered a lead role and turned it down. Before Robin Williams was ever attached to Mrs. Doubtfire, the role of Daniel Hillard was offered to someone else entirely, Tim Allen. Depending on which source you consult, Allen was approached for either Daniel or the role of Stu Dunmire, Miranda's new boyfriend, and he turned the offer down. The following year, Allen starred in The Santa Claus, in which he plays a man who accidentally becomes Father Christmas and has to put on a fat suit and a white beard. So Tim Allen went from turning down a disguise movie to making a disguise movie. He also played Buzz Lightyear in Toy Story 2 years later. Life has a sense of irony. Number 15. The young cast was drawn from a huge audition pool. The 3 Hillard children, Lydia, Christopher, and little Natalie, were cast from an enormous pool of young actors, and the final selections became significant in ways nobody could have predicted at the time. Mara Wilson, who was just 6 years old when she played Natalie, the youngest daughter, went on to play the lead in Matilda in 1996 and became one of the defining child actors of the decade for an entire generation. Lisa Jacob, who played the eldest daughter Lydia, had already been working steadily as a child actor in Canada. Matthew Lawrence, who played middle child Christopher, would go on to teen stardom in the late 90s. It was, in retrospect, a remarkable gathering of young talent and one that would have looked very different had even one casting decision gone the other way. One brief note on the record: some write-ups have mistakenly credited Mara Wilson with playing Lydia. To be absolutely clear, Mara Wilson played Natalie, the youngest. Lydia was Lisa Jacob, just setting the record straight. Number 16. Stu Dunmire was originally written as a villain. Pierce Brosnan's character, Stuart Dunmire, patient, kind, seemingly perfect in every way that Daniel Hillard is not, was not always the decent man you see on screen. In early drafts of the script, Stu was written as a more overtly negative presence, the evil stepfather archetype, the external villain for Daniel to fight and ultimately defeat. Chris Columbus pushed back hard. His argument was straightforward and smart. If Stu is a villain, you let Daniel off the hook. The story stops being about Daniel's flaws and becomes a conventional hero versus bad guy narrative. A genuinely good Stu is far more uncomfortable because it forces Daniel and the audience to acknowledge that the problem is not some cartoon nemesis. The problem is Daniel's own inability to control himself. Columbus won the argument. Stu became a decent man, and the film became something more honest and more unsettling than it would have been otherwise. Casting sorted, characters rewritten. But there was one more enormous battle still to come, and it went right to the heart of what this film was actually trying to say about families, divorce, and whether happy endings are even honest. Number 17. The studio wanted a happy reunion. The filmmakers said no. Mrs. Doubtfire ends with Daniel and Miranda remaining divorced. They do not get back together. The children accept the new arrangement. There is love, but there is no reunion. And for 1993 Hollywood, that was a genuinely radical choice. The studio wanted none of it. 20th Century Fox pushed hard for the conventional ending. Daniel and Miranda reconcile, the family reunites, everybody goes home happy. It is what family comedies were supposed to do. The original screenwriter, Randy Mayhem Singer, refused to write that ending. The studio ultimately removed her from the project and brought in a second writer, Leslie Dixon, to produce the happy reunion version they wanted. Columbus and the producers read the new draft and concluded that the original ending was right. Singer was brought back. The honest ending was restored. The studio backed down. The film ends the way it was always supposed to end, but it cost the screenwriter her job temporarily to get there. The fact that it paid off so completely that the film's emotional honesty is precisely why it endures is some kind of creative justice. Number 18. It actually sparked real-world conversations about custody and co-parenting. Here is the fact that probably surprises people most, because it takes Mrs. Doubtfire out of the realm of entertainment trivia and puts it into the real world. Because of its sensitive, non-sensationalized portrayal of divorce and shared custody, the film reportedly sparked genuine conversations among families, legal professionals, and even family court judges about co-parenting arrangements. Not many comedies can claim that. The film's insistence on treating the children's perspective as the moral center of the story, rather than the parents' romantic arc, gave it a weight that audiences clearly recognized and responded to in ways that went well beyond the cinema. Anne Fine's original insistence that the children not be written as irritating or bratty paid dividends far beyond the screen. These were recognizably real kids in a recognizably real situation, and that reality is what made the film matter in living rooms and courtrooms alike. The film was honest. The film was brave. The film changed things, and then it became something else entirely, a monument. But before we get to what Mrs. Doubtfire means now, in the wake of everything that's happened since 1993, let's talk about the house. Number 19. The Steiner Street house became a tourist attraction. The exterior of the Hillard family home in the film is a genuine Victorian painted lady located at 2640 Steiner Street in San Francisco's Pacific Heights neighborhood. After the film's release in November 1993, the house became a minor but persistent tourist destination, one of those places that fans of the movie would detour to visit, photograph, and stand in front of, just to feel connected to something they loved. The actual address is given out loud in the film itself. Miranda recites it over the phone, which only made it easier for people to find. The plastic surgeon who owns the house, for the record, is reportedly quite tolerant of the whole thing. Number 20. After Robin Williams died, the house became a memorial. On August 11, 2014, Robin Williams died, and within hours, people began gathering at 2640 Steiner Street. Not at Williams's home, not at a theater, at the Hillard house. Fans left flowers on the front steps, photographs of Williams, handwritten letters, and candles. The Steiner Street address became an impromptu, spontaneous, entirely community-created memorial to a man who had made that fictional family home feel real to millions of people. It is a deeply moving thing that when people needed somewhere to go to grieve Robin Williams, a significant number of them went to the house where he had pretended to be an old woman who loved 3 children who weren't her own. That is what it means for a performance to genuinely touch people. What makes this even more powerful is how Mrs. Doubtfire quietly transformed over time. When it first came out in 1993, audiences saw it as a comedy funny, chaotic, heartfelt. But after Robin Williams' passing in 2014, the film started to feel different. Suddenly, moments that once felt playful hit a little harder. That final TV studio scene where Mrs. Doubtfire speaks directly to children about divorce? It doesn't just feel like a character anymore. It feels like Williams himself, reaching through the screen, offering comfort in a way only he could. The line about different kinds of families stopped being just dialogue and started feeling like a message. Fans revisiting the film today often say the same thing. It's no longer just funny. It's emotional in a way it wasn't before. And that shift is part of why a sequel feels almost impossible, not just because of logistics, but because of tone. You're not just continuing a story, you're trying to recreate something that was built on a very specific kind of magic, the kind that came from Williams himself. Which raises a bigger question. Was Mrs. Doubtfire a movie that could ever truly be repeated? Or was it always meant to be a one-time lightning strike? The sequel that was never going to work, and then really wasn't. Hollywood's instinct after any enormous commercial success is to immediately start planning the sequel, and Mrs. Doubtfire was no exception. The first real attempt to develop a follow-up began in the early 2000s, around 2001, with actress and writer Bonnie Hunt attached to develop it. Script work began in 2003. By 2006, a version existed that Williams was already unhappy with. Rewrites were ordered. A 2007 release was anticipated. Then, in December 2006, the whole thing was quietly killed. Williams told a journalist simply that the script just did not work. That should have been the end of it. It was not. In April 2014, just months before Williams died, Fox announced the sequel was back in development. With Williams and Columbus both on board, and Elf screenwriter David Barenbaum writing a new script. Some of the original cast expressed cautious interest. Others, notably Mara Wilson, were publicly clear that they wanted nothing to do with it. Columbus went to Williams's home to discuss the new script in person. Williams liked what he heard, with one concern. He asked whether he would have to be in the Doubtfire suit as much as in the original. The daily 4-hour transformation had been physically demanding in 1993. More than 20 years later, with Williams in his early 60s, the prospect of repeating it was genuinely daunting. Columbus assured him they would look at finding ways to reduce the time the character spent in full costume. That was one of the last times Columbus and Williams spoke. Williams died 4 months later. Columbus has since stated, clearly and without ambiguity, that there is no Mrs. Doubtfire sequel without Robin Williams. Not a reimagining, not a reboot, no sequel. The story is complete. And those 972 boxes in a warehouse? Columbus wants to open them. He wants to hire an editor, go through 2 million feet of Robin Williams at his most alive, and make a documentary that shows the world what was really happening on that set. If that film ever gets made, it will be the real sequel, not another story, but the true story of how the original came to exist, told through the eyes of the man who created it. Mrs. Doubtfire was never just a movie about a man in a dress. It was a movie about what people are willing to sacrifice to stay close to the ones they love. And the most extraordinary thing about it is that the man at the center of it, the one under all that latex and all those improvisations and all those 4-hour mornings, lived that truth every single day he was on that set. And there you have it, 20 verified, extraordinary facts about one of the most remarkable films of the 1990s. From the Edinburgh shop that gave us a character name, to the melting makeup that gave us an iconic scene, to the Steiner Street house that became a place of mourning. Every layer of this story is more extraordinary than the last. Mrs. Doubtfire earned its place in cinema history not by accident, but because of the people who fought for it, built it, and absolutely refused to let it become something smaller than it needed to be. If this gave you chills, or made you want to immediately rewatch the film, hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because next time we're going deep on another legendary 90s classic with secrets just as wild as these. See you there.